Hey everyone, welcome back to Outside the Studio. This is Tessa here. I am so honored to have Marc Lesser join us on Outside the Studio today. Marc is many things. Marc, how do I introduce you? Just having sat with you a couple of times, I already feel like it's just a relaxed presence. You're such a relaxed presence. And aside from that, you are the author of a book, Finding Clarity: How Compassionate Accountability Builds Vibrant Relationships, Thriving Workplaces, and Meaningful Lives. I'm holding up a copy of the book. If you are watching on YouTube, there it is. It's a beautiful blue cover. There's a lot of different directions we can go with this work. One thing I would love to start with, though, Marc, is to just have you introduce yourself to the audience. I think you know yourself better than anyone.
Thanks, Tessa. Well, I can introduce myself in many ways. I often start by saying that my 1 year leave of absence from college, from Rutgers University, turned into 10 years at the San Francisco Zen Center, and it really changed my life, and in some strange way. I don't know, strange, obvious, is still in a way the support or basis for much of what I do in the world. And I feel like one of the luckiest people on earth in what I get to do. I sometimes describe myself as a, stealth Zen teacher working in the business world. I get to work with business leaders in for-profit and nonprofit businesses, and I've done a lot of work at Google. There was a time when I found myself standing up in front of auditoriums of Google engineers teaching mindfulness and emotional intelligence. And I love to teach. I love doing one-on-one coaching. I love developing programs, and yeah, and I'm also a Zen teacher, and as well as a father and husband and grandfather these days. That seems almost hard for me to get those words out, but it's a fact. So that's a little about me.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. I'm just imagining you teaching emotional intelligence and mindfulness practices to a room full of Google engineers. Was that I'm just curious about that. Can
It
you
was
just
beautiful. It was really beautiful, and that well, we often had to start with the science of meditation. And that would sort of calm the engineering mind to see that there are actually lots of studies and some really interesting science about, how meditation changes the brain, and all kinds of other interesting things. And then they would, it's interesting. One of the things that I love doing is creating safe spaces, learning spaces. And the Google engineers would say they felt like they could take their game faces off in our trainings. And they discovered a kind of a love of listening practice and getting out of the world of ego and competition and into a much more intuitive world and safe world. And because so much of the workplace these days is being on teams, working with other people. And that's not something that Google engineers or almost anyone actually is trained for. And it's hard. Collaborating is hard. Alignment is hard. Working, you know, how we work effectively together. Uh, Really listening to each other, aligning, dealing skillfully with conflict. So all of those things, I get to do that in a lot of different environments these days. At different, I'm working with some colleges, working with, yeah, just super interesting. You know, everywhere you look, it's people trying to figure out how to work together.
Yeah. Well, that's something you brought up, something I definitely wanted to dive into today and take some time to unravel is this concept of facing the conflict rather than avoiding it. Um, or maybe another way to say that would be to have the hard conversation with the person that you might feel like you disagree with
Mhm.
rather than avoiding that.
Mhm.
It sounds like you've got some strategy around that, some thoughts
Yeah,
around that.
yeah. The subtitle of the book is about compassionate accountability, and I've more and more grown to like the word alignment even more than the word accountability. Sounds a little harsh, holding ourselves or holding others accountable. There's something just a little rough about it. But if you think of it instead as aligning around what does success look like? What are we trying to accomplish? How do we want to work together and aligning? And even, this is true in all relationships, whether it's with our partners or children or parents. Like it's so often I think there's a lot of and fear and anxiety about lack of alignment, and it's hard, like is this going to push people away? Am I not going to be seen or heard or liked or all those things? And what I've noticed is that avoiding lack of alignment is trouble,
Mm.
and and that it's so much better to find skillful and caring ways to work with it, and it actually brings people closer together. It's a way of moving things forward as opposed to, you know, so often people just either fear it or give up. And
Yeah.
like I notice, I've had the experience of walking into organizations where I can just feel that people are not connecting with each other, are not listening, respecting, wanting the best. They've all kind of given up on these. Lack of alignment can feel daunting and too difficult to contend with.
Yeah, well, I think that's exactly my question is, I've experienced this in my own life where that sense of fear is so great that it leaves me stuck in that place of avoiding the conversation to begin with. So, whether it be a large scale organization or an individual, where do you start with that? How do you even begin to
Yeah.
get
So
unstuck?
one way, there's a few different models. Uh, one model is a model that comes from a great book about this topic called Difficult Conversations,
Mm.
and it comes out of a Harvard negotiating team, and they suggest parsing apart, noticing that there's the story, there's the feelings, and then there's identity issues.
Mm.
And that usually what gets us hooked by not wanting to have these conversations is because we're not kind of looking at, like by identity issues, I mean like especially in work, it's like, am I competent? Is my competency being
Mm.
questioned here?
Mhm.
Right? Or am I lovable? Am I a good person? But all of those are there. That's, we humans are very sensitive creatures, and we all have these very tender identities going, and they come into play whenever, especially, you know, when we're trying to get something done, and we have different varying ideas, or someone says something and it hurts our feelings,
Mm.
and we weave a story, and then we make they're a bad person, they're trying, it's like we're very sensitive, and we easily feel threatened, and we easily scan for threats. So there's something about bringing awareness and bringing some skillful models into how to have these conversations. So even just asking the question, what is the story here? What feelings am I having? What do I think the other person's story might be? And maybe even asking them, like, what story are you telling yourself about what just happened here? Uh, what feelings do you have? Um, and yeah, and for yourself, questioning like, what are my identity issues here? Interesting that I'm feeling my competency questioned.
Would you say that that is the same thing, the identity issues being the story we tell about ourselves? Like, I am worthy, I am not worthy. And so when you bring up this story, like if I were to ask you, Mark, what story do you have about your competency to be an author or to lead these things, is that's wrapped up in your identity, right? Do you ever feel like,
Totally, totally. And we all, you know, it's it's human to nobody, no human that I know really, we don't feel confident all the time. We often question our abilities and our competencies, and this is why I think it really helps. This is why having support systems helps.
Mhm.
Working with yoga teachers and therapists and coaches and body workers, because it really helps to talk these things through, to get the support of people that believe in us. Yeah, I mean, I, I notice even now. What was it the other day? The other day, oh, I got a text from someone who I hadn't seen in a long, long time,
Mm.
and it said, "Mark, this is Mary. Call me." And I saw this text, and I immediately thought, "This is Kurt. Did I do something to hurt? Like what?" I
Mhm.
immediately wondered, and then of course, I call her, and I was moved to tears by what she wanted my help with. She wanted me to come in and work inside of her company with some issues about, the stress that's happening in the world. And she thought I was the person. And I was like, so it went from, me questioning did I do something to hurt this lady, to
Mm.
she's calling me to offer me this, tremendous trust and respect that she had for me. So, but I had to note and smile and cringe at my own tenderness about these things. And but we're all, I think most of us are that way, and it's not bad. It's actually, you know, I think there's something about being very humble,
Mm.
but also being very confident at the same time.
Mm. That's such an interesting dichotomy. My yoga teacher always says that yoga is the study of opposites.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Well, I think being human. I think
yeah.
really, I was just on a call with someone who uh, was going on and on about feelings of scarcity, and
Mm.
this is, like, my business isn't working, my life's not working, blah, blah, he went on and on. I mean, and this happens to be a person who has tremendous resources,
Mhm. Mm.
both, internal resources, but also like financial, and like, and but that doesn't, the the reality doesn't matter that much. What matters is how we see ourselves and how we see the world. And this is what I love about, the work that I get to do. And because it's yeah, it's what is our view? How are we, what world, and that we all create our worlds. That we,
Mm.
I mean, and literally, we all create our worlds in so many different ways, and that we have to contend with these opposites, right, of confidence and humility, and, abundance and scarcity, right? As soon as you start comparing, like, right? I mean, or success and failure are a great exercise that I often give people is, write in your journal and describe what a failure you are, all the things that you didn't do, and all the things you failed at and blah, blah, blah. Go on, really get into it. And now the next page, describe yourself as a success. Tell me about all of the successes that you've had and all the positive things, all the people that you've had positive impact with. And it's like, which is it? Well, they're both, for most of us, it's interesting, uh, yeah, trying to get at what the, what's the story?
Mhm.
What's the, we do live, we do live in the world of fiction quite a bit.
Yeah. It's
Well,
so interesting trying to parse that truth. I mean, you're saying write a list of all of your failures, write a list of all of your successes, and then, which is true. I think that we can get, especially in our society, there's this idea of, not an idea, concept, I guess, of toxic positivity, where we're kind of,
yeah,
oh, that thing that we did that we wish we hadn't have done, we can gloss over that. I mean, that's not really the definition of toxic positivity, but I think you get where I'm going with that idea of how do we hold both
yeah,
positive, negative, light, shadow
yeah.
in a way that's less judgmental of good or bad or right or wrong, and accept that they're both existing simultaneously, you know? I don't know if that's an actual question, but I think what this gets to for me is the idea of practicing compassion towards ourselves. And when we
Yeah.
practice compassion towards ourselves, is we
Yeah.
can then give it to
You know,
others.
Tessa, I want to bring up this story that I told about this person who called me and she wanted me to come do some work in her company.
Mm-hmm.
She asked, "What would I do? Like right now, people in the company there's real divisions about like what side are you on? How do you respond to the atrocities that we see happening in the world right now?"
Mm-hmm.
And this goes right, I think, to what we're talking about, in that what I suggested is that somehow I would suggest that we all just feel the pain of what's happening. We open our hearts and feel the pain, let it in, not avoid it. And we would also feel our wishes for peace, our wishes for well-being, our wishes, our hopes and wish. So it's like not avoiding the pain completely. And this is very similar, I think, to what we're talking about in terms of, well, how do you work with conflict? You
Mm-hmm.
start by feeling it. You start by actually saying this hurts, and you're not avoiding it at all, really feeling it. But then you're like, okay, what can I do? What can I do to bring some healing or connection? Or is this, not that we have to face and deal with every one of our conflicts, but we also don't need to avoid every one of them. That there's somehow, again, it's mostly about conscious awareness, and having some skills and tools for how to work with these lack of alignment and conflicts.
Yeah. Yeah, I appreciate that. The other direction this takes me in, especially when we're talking about conflict with others, is the skill of listening.
Hmm.
Um, Maybe in conflict, or maybe it's not in conflict, but just being able to actively listen, be present, and hold space, and in a way that creates more meaning and connection. And so I wanted to hear your thoughts on how to do this. I don't know that it's a skill that, I mean, we certainly don't teach it in school, but you would think that it might be innate, and I don't know that it
Yeah.
actually is.
Well, this was one of the real surprises, going back to the work I was talking about with Google engineers, is just we would practice listening. So we'd practice like just one person talk for 3 minutes without, and the other person just listening without interrupting, without asking questions. So it's a kind of, it's a little bit of odd thing to be doing, but it really brought home, it gave people the experience of how rarely they actually listened, and how rarely they were actually being listened to, because the training is all about being smart and saying smart things, asking the right questions. The training that most of us get isn't about like just listening and and then speaking in a way where someone is just taking in your words. So I think it's again, it's one of those, cliche throwaway, listening, but it's profound actually to actually, uh, and in some way, meditation practice, mindfulness practice is listening to yourself, creating the space to listen to yourself, maybe so that you can more effectively listen to others.
Oh, I love that. Oh, that's such a nice. I might have to borrow that from you, Mark.
It's freely given. I don't know whoever I got it from, I'm sure won't mind.
Okay, great. Because I find that so helpful in terms of holding space for others and teaching meditation in terms of the response of, oh, well, I can't meditate because I can't get my mind to stop thinking. And I often will say, well, that's your mind has a job, it is to think. That is consciousness. And that's not really the point of meditation.
Right.
Um, but yeah, to be able to focus it on something intentional rather.
Yeah.
Okay.
It isn't unusual, is it, to feel stressed and busy in whatever work we choose. And it almost feels like a busy trap. And I wonder, I mean, what did you say to your coaching client that you were talking to yesterday about this? What advice do you give to people?
So I start by even asking the question about one, you know, what is your what state of mind, what assumptions, how is it for you? Do you ever think about what are maybe there's usually some combination of external causes and internal causes. Usually we only focus on the external causes and don't think at all that we have some choice about bringing a different mindset to how we work. I asked her if she has meditation practice. That that my that this is, I think, one of the real beauties, advantages, gifts of meditation is that uh, it gives us, I think, a little more insight and leverage to be able to bring a different mindset to what we're doing. The most blatant. I think I do think of a coaching client who sat down with me and she said, "I'm going to have a horrendous day today." And I'm like, well, okay, that's what you want, but like, why? Like, who's creating your schedule? Who's creating your day? Who's creating your mindset? What about, yeah, I'd really like to have a nourishing, effective, connected. So it's partly getting clear even about like what is and what we aspire. How would we like to be? How would we like to be showing up in work? And then starting to look at, well, what are some small changes and adjustments? Again, often both, you know, again, there's the practical, there's how we manage our calendars, there's the kinds of conversations that we're having, there's what we're choosing to do and not do, and then there's the more what again, the internal or the sacred, the the aspiration to get a lot done. It's not, and be really, it's interesting. Part of it is language. So instead of busy, how about engaged? Instead of stressed, how about, I'm learning how to bring more sense of stability and centeredness into my very full, and engaging work days.
Yeah.
I want to be mindful of our time. So let's switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about some really key themes in the book. One of them that is it's in the title, it jumps off the page, you talk about it often, is compassionate accountability and how we're defining accountability And why is it so important? Not only in the workplace, but in our relationships.
Yeah.
And how do we achieve it?
Yeah. So it's interesting. I'm thinking now, if I were to be writing the book again now, I might, I might, instead of using the word accountability, I'm more and more liking the word alignment. Accountability has a bad reputation. Nobody likes accountability. It kind of feels cold and harsh, and like we don't like hold myself accountable, hold others accountable, lack of accountability. I mean, it's super important, but it has a certain baggage to it. I think alignment achieves all the same qualities without the baggage.
Okay.
And even again, even calling it compassionate, like compassion has its own baggage, and in that compassion, I think, is like really compassion, like in the workplace. So it's interesting. On the one hand, compassion, I think, maybe is a little bit too squishy, a little bit too soft, and accountability is a little too hard. So, but alignment, aligning around what success looks like both. Again, I think there's the in our maybe and I think we can have alignment even in our family values, in our friendships, in our love relationships. But a lot of what I'm writing about is in a work situation, aligning around financial success, product success, but also culture success. How are we working together? What does it feel like to work here? Can we create an environment that is open and safe and energetic and healthy? Aligning around what those things look like and feel like, and again, having those conversations and working to close the gaps in whatever the differences are in alignment.
I'm thinking about having these hard conversations as an employee with a boss who feels like there's not alignment there, right? Like you're doing something, you're producing something, a project maybe, and it feels like it falls short of some sort of expectation from your boss, or maybe that's just like across the board as an employee. You feel like there's something that is missing. I mean, I've certainly felt like this in my days, and I remember feeling like, okay, I have to have this conversation. I need to have a heart to heart with my boss.
Yep.
I need to understand where that gap is. You have a chapter on Mind the Gaps in between the expectation and my output. And those were always really scary conversations to have. But I remember what I would do is oftentimes I would write it out before I'd have that conversation. That seemed to work for me. I'm wondering what you suggest, and if there's any sort of like tips that you would suggest practicing before you actually go have that hard conversation. I think for so many of us, we stop short of actually having the conversation because it can be so scary.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's interesting. There's what I think of as the ongoing alignment doesn't ideally doesn't need to be scary. That there's enough practice at it, enough trust, that it's something that you're doing really regularly, just checking in, checking what happens is we don't have those conversations and time goes by, and the gap grows, and then it's scary, right? Now it's like, oh man, like that, so it's the ongoing avoidance of the gap, and it gets scarier and scarier. So it reminds me a little bit of even when I was CEO of my first company. Many years ago, I started a publishing company, and and one of my there was some gap with me and one of my key employees where it seemed like she was angry with me, and I noticed I'm walking on eggshells and we're hardly talking to each other. And finally I I said, we need to talk. What's happening here? Are you angry with me about something? And she looked at me and she's like, this has nothing to do with you. I'm having issues with my marriage. So and we had an agreement there. We made an agreement to what we called a no festering rule, that anytime one of us was feeling some gap or feeling, some anger or disappointment, feeling it, projecting it, that we would talk about it rather than walking on eggshells around each other. That was big, and often, uh, so there are many parts to this, you know, recognizing gaps, getting skillful at having these so-called genuine conversations or difficult conversations, and super common, right? Super common in the workplace, whether it's with your boss, with your coworkers, or with people who work for you. I mean, even now, you know, I am currently, I have I'm an entrepreneur with a one-person business, but I have various, I have my tech people, my website developers, my marketing people, and I notice there's that need for those alignment conversations. What are we each expecting? How's it going? How can we check in regularly about aligning about what success looks like. Um, yeah, it's just, and even in all our relationships, right? With our partners, with our children, with our parents, it's just there. It's so it's ongoing practice. Again, I think I think it's I think there's a practical element to it, and I do think there's kind of a sacred element to it. The sacred element is the trusting ourselves, learning to trust ourselves, and you know, and noticing our own deep patterns, and how and being able to little by little to shift those patterns and be more courageous, and be able to take those risks. But there's definitely a practical, skillful part of having these conversations as well.
Yeah. I'm thinking about these, you mentioned patterns, and one that I typically fall into in terms of communicating with a team, whether it be a boss or a coworker, is I get in my head about my communication style being a little bit in the weeds or too overwhelming or too much. And so, because I like to check in and I'm very intuitive, and sometimes I'll get wrapped up in how, I'll make up some story, kind of like what you experienced about why someone's acting a certain way, and it always is because I did something, right? Mark, it's been such a pleasure speaking with you and getting to know you. Thank you so much for your time. I'm wondering, as a last final question, if there's any key takeaway you want to share from our conversation.
Well, I'll end with one of my favorite quotes, which is Wendell Berry, the fifth generation Kentucky farmer, said, "Be joyful, though you've considered all the facts." And I've always liked that. So to me, it's also right in line with our conversation, because it's about considering all the facts, all of the facts, being curious, seeing from many points of view, seeing the paradoxes, the opposites, and maintaining a sense, if not joy, at least maybe some sense of a positive attitude, equanimity. And I'll also say that please come find me. My website is Marc Lesser, MarcLesser.net. And I also do I lead a regular Wednesday evening Zen meditation group. And I'm about to put up a whole bunch of, I'm kind of just scheduling my my 2024 events that I'll be putting on my website, on my calendar. And Tessa, thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Marc.
Well, everyone, that concludes another amazing episode of Outside the Studio. I hope you enjoyed yourself. I hope you learned something new, maybe remembered something old, maybe felt inspired to apply something to your life. You can hear my dog in the background. She's doing a little happy dance. So Daisy enjoyed it. Anyhow, I wanted to just pop in here to wrap us up to say a couple of things. Number one, I have such an amazing team that helps me put these podcasts together. Without them, I wouldn't, be able to bring these amazing conversations to you. So thank you to my producer, my director of creative services, my sound editor, my engineer, Consistency Media. Don't know what I would do without you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And the amazing creation and artistic, musical genius, Drew Lovern. Thank you so much for putting together this music specifically for Outside the Studio. So unique to the show, only place you're ever going to hear it is right here. Thanks, you guys. You make my world go round. Stay well, everyone. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review, share on the socials, especially if it's a show that you think, hey, this could help somebody else. That's what this is all about, right? We're sharing information so that we're better, so that we're inspired, so that we're lifting each other up, and we're learning how to be in this world, living on this planet to the best of our ability, sharing information and inspiring one another. And that's my hope. That's my hope for the show. Take care.